Hi, I'm Ed Bacon, the rector of All Saints Church, Pasadena. Whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on the journey of faith, I hope that you'll find something here that speaks to you. Welcome.
And now, Ann Peterson.
Wow. Wow. Hi. I'm Ann, and I'm a church lady. I'm as surprised, I think I am as surprised as you are that I'm here today. In high school, when I took the skills test for suitable career gifts, church lady was not one of the categories. I am so delighted and honored to be here at this festive brunch organized by these amazing women's community people. And as was mentioned, I think Jerry said that I was one of the founders of the women's ministry called the Women's Council about 30 years ago. Some of those people in the room today too. And I am proud to see how it has not only survived but evolved and grown and found its way year after year into what seemed appropriate for the time. So many happy memories are flooding my mind this morning. The workshop Kathy Clement and I led on the book Unplug the Christmas Machine, where I liberated myself from the need to make Christmas cookies and send cards and never looked back. The annual weekend, so-called silent retreats, especially the one at St. Mary's in Santa Barbara, where the third woman priest we hired, Susan Buell, was our speaker and celebrated the Eucharist at the end of the weekend on the veranda of the retreat center. And my confrontation afterwards with a very tearful Sister Donna Marie, who said we had desecrated the grounds of their retreat center by having a woman priest celebrate the Holy Mysteries, as they are under the auspices of the Diocese of Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, and do not believe in women's ordination. The Rector's Forum with the first woman rabbi in Southern California, Laura Geller, which gave the Women's Council a new focus to examine the issues of importance to women through the lens of our faith, and the amazing series of potluck suppers in many of your homes that followed on a wide variety of topics. Creating an evening service on July 22nd to celebrate Mary Magdalene's Day with female pronouns for God throughout the service, and a Eucharistic prayer that Ann Howard and I composed, using for the first time the phrase, God dwells in you. The creation of Grace Center, a place for children who had experienced abuse to be counseled by a team in a safe place, now part of 5 Acres. And more recently, the Women's Room, where women who live on the street can shower, wash their clothes, rest, and hang out. The martini tasting at the home of Liz Morton. Her recipe did not win. And the deep friendships that have developed for me. In one of the bleakest moments in my life, when I had to move from the family home and I was totally paralyzed, they all came and packed up every single thing. I am so grateful. When Jerry and Chris surprised me with this invitation to speak, they wanted a title, and Confessions of a Church Lady just came right out of my mouth. Among the many things I should confess, I have chosen 4. I apologize if I am repeating some material some of you may have heard, but it's my story, and at this point, I can't seem to find another one. And no, I couldn't find a flower that was any bigger than this, although I tried. The first thing I have had to confess, even to myself, is that I was not actually qualified for the job I was originally hired for, executive assistant to the rector. Vance and I and our 2 young daughters, Sarah and Tess, who is here today, and I'm very happy about that. We had moved back to Southern California in 1977. We owned a house in La Cañada that we had just purchased, and we owned a house in Toledo, which we had been unable to sell. I needed to find a job, and I scurried around and found a job in the middle of the year at La Cañada High School teaching English. I would be there today, perhaps, except for declining enrollment. And so I learned firsthand that the last shall be first, and that actually means the last hired, first fired. So by this time we had sold the home, and so that wasn't the issue anymore. But I'd found my full-time babysitter, and I thought I might want to do something else. So I started looking around for a job. I had no idea how to get anything but a teaching job, which is the only kind of job I'd ever had. And fortunately, my mother-in-law was reading the want ads for me, and she saw... That's good, right? It was good. Maybe she was looking for a different daughter-in-law in the process, too. I'm not really sure. That could be, right? Yeah. So she said, oh, there's a job in the paper at this church in Pasadena, and I know you're a real churchy person, so you might, enjoy this. So I'd been applying, to box numbers with resumes, and you never heard anything from a box number. And this had a phone number, so I called on the phone. I got this really nice woman, and she said, well, you can come by and pick up an application. We're just about ready to hire somebody, but if you want to come and pick up an application, that would be good. Which I did, casually attired in a green sundress with bows on the shoulders and flip-flop sandals. As it turned out, one did not pick up an application. One sat in a chair, filled it out, and also had to answer a letter that someone had sent to the rector with some kind of question. So I filled out the form and took on a typewriter, electric typewriter, I composed a letter to be sent to this person, and I gave the person a couple of options. They might want to do this or could possibly do that. And so then the woman excused herself and went off with my letter. And she returned in a few minutes to say that Dr. Regas was on campus and he would like to see me. When I think about myself flip-flopping into his office, I still cringe just a little. How far away from presenting a professional appearance could one possibly get? But at the time, I was totally unconscious about it, and maybe that was a good thing, because I was never nervous. I felt totally at ease. So I spent an hour talking about myself with Dr. Regas. Then at the end of that interview, he said, well, are you interested in pursuing this job? And I said, well, I'm not sure exactly what this job is. And he said, well, I just want somebody to help me more. I don't know exactly what that means. So can you come back next week? So I said, okay, I'd come back better dressed. I came back next week. We had another hour-long interview, just asking questions about me, my political affiliation, did I plan to have any more children? How was I going to take care of the children that I already had? What was my political affiliation? Who were my parents? Did I have a good marriage? All questions which are totally illegal now. When I got to the end of the second hour, I said, I really hope I never get hired. I'm having such a good time talking about myself. And I'd given him, people to call, my references. And then, of course, as he was listening to other names I dropped, then he found those people and called them and got information that hadn't been vetted by me, but it seemed to work out okay. So at the end of that third hour-long interview, and he said you should plan lunch at the end of this one. So I think if everything went well, I was going to be hired. So he took me to the Old Chronicle restaurant. Remember the Old Chronicle? You remember the Old Chronicle. And we had this wonderful lunch, and it was Doug Vest, Dick Gillette, and Houston Horn who were there to check me out. And at the end of the lunch, the waiter came by and said, would anybody like dessert? You know how people go, oh, no, couldn't possibly. And Houston Horn said they had the finest mousse pie on the face of the earth here, chocolate mousse pie on the face of the earth here, and we're each going to have a piece. And I said, this is my place. Over the 18 years George and I worked together, I was found, he had said, he wants this job to change, and the job was going to be expanding. So over the 18 years that I worked with him, I found that I was good at the expansive parts of the job and not so good at many of the things a top-notch executive assistant like Ed Bacon's assistant, Maren Tompkins, is skilled at. I loved answering letters and fielding challenging phone calls after George preached some kind of hot-button topic sermon on how we're going to be now a prayerfully pro-choice church, or now we're going to bless same-sex covenants, and we're going to have a task force with a task force and parish process, but it's not to change my mind, it's just to bring everybody on board. So phone calls after that, and especially after Mark and Phil had their blessing, the first blessing, and the first service, celebratory blessing service in the church after we'd renovated it. So that was in 1992 in January, very special time. So I liked that, and I liked all the things that were becoming part of my portfolio now in this expansive thing. And then I realized I was having more trouble with keeping the office organized, keeping up with the correspondence, and keeping George on track with whatever he needed for meetings, because now I was part of the Prayerfully Pro-Choice Task Force, and I was part of all the things that were evolving. As I became staff to the Women's Council and was asked to begin writing prayers for the liturgy and to serve on task forces, I found that balancing the number of new things I was responsible for and being an effective director of the rector was becoming challenging. A management consultant came and looked at the jobs of all the staff members, and he said, well, yours really, it's a combination of program and support, and he said it's just basically impossible. And then hiring Lois Marsky early on in my tenure, first for 2 days a week and then full-time, saved my life, and what a joy it was to work with her. Okay, that was confession number 1. Confession number 2. I was a feminist who was unable to imagine God as female. In college, I went to college in the mid-60s, and I read Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique. I was very influenced by that. And both of my parents had had careers, so I figured that a woman could have careers and have a family. But no one ever led me to believe that women could have careers other than as a teacher and a nurse or a stewardess. Those were sort of the areas that were suitable for women. At least that's what I thought at the time. I had also not realized how male-dominated religion was. I think I had the same picture of God that a lot of people have growing up, the white guy with a white beard, old guy, white beard, on the throne of heaven, sitting on the throne of heaven. And of course, the structure of our English language also supported that male-dominating notion. I was an English major, and I was an English teacher, and I knew very well that using this, when you use the singular pronoun, you use the masculine form of it, as in, everyone must bring his book and his pen to my class, or he is going to be in big trouble with me. One day I found myself sitting at my daughter's Christmas pageant. The angel said, "Peace on earth, goodwill to men." And I said, not so much. This is really not working for me anymore. This fortunately coincided with a move at All Saints to address the language of our liturgy, which Margaret Seidenquist and others had brought to George's attention. I think Margaret went over the liturgy with a red pen, marking all the exclusive male wording, and handed it over to the rector at the end of the door, on the way out of church. And I think she wore him down. That's what happened. Over a period of years, we convened 2 task forces on language. The first was on making the language of the liturgy inclusive, and the second one was on the images of God. Some people on the task force, the second task force, had trouble with the idea of changing the language for God that was in the Bible. After all, Jesus is said to have called God Father and Daddy. But once we got to the agreement that if God isn't beyond our imagining, then it isn't God, and that to cling to one particular image bordered on idolatry, we sailed on, agreeing that what we really needed were a zillion metaphors for God that we would cycle through the liturgy week after week, because we have a God who is known yet beyond all knowing. One Sunday, we experimented with a liturgy we called the Feminine Face of God, and we used only feminine pronouns for God throughout the service. We attached to the liturgy an instrument for people's response. Some of the people were uncomfortable with the language, and some people loved it. Guess who is who? And the most interesting response was from men who had had an abusive or an absent father and said they never could have imagined that God was a father. And they found God as the concept of God as a female opening a whole new and welcome experience for them. I discovered that it was possible for me to agree with that feminine face of God intellectually and not possible for me to accept it emotionally. The male God that I had grown up with was deep, deep, deep within me. And then one day, something shifted. I was composing a piece for the front panel of Saints Alive about Mother's Day. I accessed fond memories of my late mother and her wonderful physicality. Nothing was more comforting to me as a little girl than sitting on her lap with her strong arms around me. And then it clicked. I saw God as a mother offering her comforting lap and strong arms to me. Confession number 3. I believe we should treat the Bible as a controlled substance. The Bible is a book that needs to be under lock and key until the potential reader has read the opening operating manual and agreed to all the terms and conditions, among which are: 1, the stories in this book concern people who lived an extremely long time ago in cultures very different from the postmodern era in which you are living. Number 2, you need to use your imaginative right brain more than your logical left brain in reading this book. Most of the content is in the category of myth, in which the details of the story may not all be factually true, but the story itself expresses deep truths about the world and people's experiences of God. Number 3, it would be good for you to do some historical research before getting too far into this book. And 4, a literal reading of this book may be hazardous, not only to your health, but to the health of others. I personally feel that if you were to stick with an imaginative version of the creation story, where God says everything created is good, the Psalms, for when you are at the end of your rope, the stories about Jesus' interactions with people, and the parables Jesus tells, especially the one about God being like the parent who forgives the prodigal offspring, you'd get along just fine. Confession number 4. I realized, after having been here for a number of years, that I wanted to be ordained, but not as a priest. During the early days of women's ordination, we were looking for a woman to come and join the staff. And one of the members of the parish, one of the women in the parish, came up to me and said, well, you're what we want in a woman priest. Why don't you just give it up and go to seminary? I said, well, why should I do that? I get to do everything I want to now, and I don't have to go to all that work and pay all that money. And of course, now with a lot of new people coming into the church, they don't make that subtle distinction between white outfits with stoles and white outfits without stoles, and so everybody thinks I'm a priest anyway. And as I've said many times, I have nothing against priesthood in general, and I admire my priestly colleagues hugely. And my very own sweet love, my spouse Stuart, is a priest, and he's the best. In her book, Anatomy of the Spirit, Carolyn Meese talks about ordination as meaning being set aside. She describes how in early communities, individuals would go to certain other people because of some attribute they had. Some people had a healing touch, or liked experimenting with plants and found out that some would calm a rough throat or soothe a fever. Somebody else had a knack for hospitality, and there were always people over at their house spending the night or having a meal. Someone else baked beautifully or spoke convincingly. And occupations grew out of these talents and gifts as the community validated them. The author says the same thing is operating today. Each of us can be set aside or ordained for some particular kind of work. It's not even necessary for this to be our main job, but that we exercise this gift, those gifts in our lives, and that the gift is validated by the community. So, although I don't feel called to act as the presider at the Eucharist, I'm very much drawn to the idea of a ceremony of ordination. The candidate takes vows and is vested in a rather strange but generally elegant outfit and is prayed over by the assembled congregation. That sense of vocation is powerfully proclaimed and validated in a public and ceremonial way. What could we have as a set-apart ceremony for all of us, ending up with some sort of visible sign to wear, like a big flower or a pin or a feather headband? Looking at yourself as a minister and your work as ministry can change your life in deeply meaningful ways. And all along the way, people are helping us to discern. Everyone in my family was a teacher. I was laboring under some imagined responsibility to become a teacher myself, and I had an identity crisis. I came and I said to my father, I am not going to be a teacher. And he said, well, that's fine. He said, you do whatever you want. He said, I just can't believe I can do it and get paid for it. Maybe someday you will find something that will make you feel that way. The best job interview I ever had was for a job I didn't get. I had applied for a job as a writer for a textbook company. The interviewer reviewed the writing samples I had brought, but spent most of the interview asking me questions about my experience in college, asked me how I liked being a teacher, asked me what I did for fun. And through his questioning, I discovered how ill-suited I was for a career of writing. It wasn't that I couldn't write, but that I thrived on variety and interactions with people. I did become a teacher, and I have taught in junior high, high school, and community college, and I've had many, many, many good experiences. And yet, I was talking to one of our candidates for an open position the other day on campus, and I was explaining how I first felt when I walked onto this campus in my green sundress with my flip-flop sandals. I just felt totally at home, and I've felt that way every time that I've come here. I just feel like this is a welcoming place and good spirits abide here. And suddenly I channeled some experiences that I had that I hadn't even realized how many times in different teaching experiences when I'd entered the parking lot, I'd feel my stomach tighten. So now I have to say it. I can't believe I can do the work I do here with all of you and get paid for it. And I want to thank you for validating me in so many ways on my journey. And I thank you for being here this morning and being one of the reasons that I like to come to work. So thank you for all of your love and your strength on my journey. I'm not leaving until September 30th, so don't tell me goodbye today. But I love this celebration. I love this incremental step on the celebration on the incremental journey toward a new life for me. Thank you. I love you, love you, love you.
Time is it? Do we have time for a few questions? Anne, are you willing?
Does anyone have a question? See, I've said everything. Ada.
What are you going to do?
Oh, that's a secret. No, I'm not moving to San Francisco. The plan right now is that my last day is the 30th of September, and I will take 2 weeks off to go someplace restful, and then come back part-time, very part-time. Christina says I can't work more than 20 hours a week, so I will come probably Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. I'm keeping the leadership committee, and I'll be doing strategic, pastoral, and stewardship work and writing and editing for the rector's office. And I'm giving up just pretending I'm in charge of the known world. That's basically what's going to be different. Kitty?
I have a burning question. You have one of the most delightful wits, and I want to know, is that genetic?
I don't. Oh, wit. She thinks.
Parent or grandparent?
I have a parent and a grandparent. I've had them. I've had both, yeah. With wit. My father had a really good sense of humor. My mother had a great sense of metaphorical language and over-the-topness. And probably there's some combination between the two. But I'm not really like either one of them either. So I don't know. It's kind of strange, isn't it? All that genetic soup things. Yeah. Thank you, though, for your compliment. I appreciate that. I just think that if you can't... I always read the comics. You know, I'm shocked that people don't read the funny papers. It just shocks me. Not all of them are, but some of them are very, very funny because they see the ironies of life. And to me, if one doesn't have a sense of humor, one just goes down like a lead thing in the river. I mean, buoyancy. That's what we're looking for, buoyancy. And I think lightness, light touch sometimes, and a little bit of humor is very helpful. Steve. When am I starting my book? Well, you know what I've always said is that I will accept money if you would like to not be in my book. So I'm hoping to finance my retirement with that kind of money. So what will there be left to write after I take all the fun stuff out? I'm not sure. Yes?
How do you visualize all things 20 and 30 years from now?
You know, it's very interesting because when George decided to retire, I said, I'm out of here because they will not find another leader who understands what we're doing. I'm shocked by the state of the church and saddened. Everybody does the form out of the book. Well, not everybody. Okay, this is hyperbole talking, but many people do they read every lesson that's appointed for the day, and then the sermon talks about how this lesson relates to that lesson, and something that happened a long time ago, and there's no application to our lives, and what does it mean for us today? And so I'm wondering what's wrong with these people, and then what's the pool from which we're going to, what is the pool from which we could draw a successor to George Regas? And then they found this Ed Bacon guy who used to be a Baptist who's in the South, and wow. So I had no hope for the church, and and there was, and then this happened. I started looking for other jobs. I went on a lot of information interviews to different people, and mostly in the nonprofit area, because I don't know how to do anything that's profitable. And then met a lot. There was one situation, the situation was good. It was something about public financing, public education, special things. And that was good, but the person I had to work with was not. I thought, I'd have to go be with this person in the office every day. And when we had our meeting, at lunch, he kept looking around the room. We're at the California Club, and he's looking around the room to see who else is there. I'm thinking, this is really not what I had in mind. So then when Ed Bacon showed up, and he looked like he had potential, I thought, this is going to be good. And Ed really caught the spirit about what this place is about. And one of the things that this place is about is rethinking the tradition, constantly rethinking the tradition. What's working, what's not working, what are the people, the thinkers who are out there. There was a day when you wouldn't have Maher Hathout up in the pulpit there because he's not Christian and he doesn't know how to do a sermon right, or, something like that. And so now we've always had people come from different traditions. I think my theory is that happened as a result of George's protest of the Vietnam War. George came in 1967, and I think in the early 70s, he wrote that sermon. Nixon kept saying, the jury's not in on the war, the jury's not in. He wrote a sermon, Mr. President, the jury is in. And there was a huge peace operations center here. A lot of you remember all that, and counseling young men only at that time to go to Canada or become a conscientious objector. And there was rock mass, real bread, not those fake cardboard things we used in the morning. Real bread and wine and rock band. It was once a month. And people came from all over who were looking for a place to register their moral indignation at the war. And a lot of them stayed after the war was over and after George almost lost his job and hung on by a slender thread, and then started rebuilding the church, because a lot of people were unhappy and left. So those people who came to us then were Methodists and atheists and non-orgs and Buddhists, and they came, and we had a special membership for a while called General Member, because at that time the membership class led to confirmation, which meant you were becoming Episcopalian and giving up being a Quaker. They didn't want to do that. So there's a category of General Member for a long time, and then we didn't need it anymore because things are kind of different now. So I think that helped to mix up the place. It wasn't all old Episcopalians were in here. We got a lot of other people here, a lot of mix, and a lot of people who are very interested in peace and justice, otherwise they wouldn't have come here to protest the war. So I think that was a great thing that kind of shook up our church and made it good. But George was always interested in sort of pushing the boundaries, and the rubrics were kind of guidelines, and then you'd kind of move out here and you'd do this. And he did a lot. Has a very good sense of drama, and some of the things we did, we experimented with liturgy a lot, and it was a wonderful time. And I think Ed Bacon's got that spirit. One of our jobs as living, breathing people is to keep rethinking what we're doing. And so we don't get, this is the way we've always done it because, this was handed down by Jesus after the supper. He said, here, Episcopalians, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And that just, that's not really what we're interested in. We're interested in something that's living and breathing and expanding. And we all know we're all changing. And so the institution has to change too as we go. Okay, that was a long answer. Do we have any more time? Ada, sure.
George Regas is a powerful man as he is, could have not taken a step without you. And I remember when he was on the front page of every newspaper in the United States, he officiated as an Alex Jimenez. So I was in Washington, D.C. in Georgetown, and I was in church with my sister Bertie. I'm coming down the steps, it just happened. And I say to the minister, oh, hi, I'm Ada Gates from Oakland, Pasadena. Well, you would have liked, I'd taken a hot coat or something like that.
Are we done? Yes.
We have copies of your speech. My wife would love to have heard it.
Okay. Well, we can probably get one.
See Keith back there recording it?
Oh, it's all on tape.
It's on tape. I'm not sure how it will be distributed, but it probably will be somehow.
Okay. Thank you for the beautiful music. That was lovely. And thank you for all the people who worked really hard to make this not only beautiful but delicious. And thanks for the chocolate souffle. Woohoo!